What the f?
Moving now 9 times the speed of sound. Roger.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to episode 3 of the S4 restoration project. In today's episode, we're going to tackle the interior and we're going to try and see if we can save the motor without actually pulling and doing timing chains. Like I said in previous episodes, this thing has a misfire on one of the banks. Most likely cause is obviously timing chains, tensioner, guides, whatever it is. The 4.2 is notorious for timing chain issues. This car is at about 200,000 kilometers, so it's right around the perfect mark for timing chain failures. My hope is it's not, obviously. I would like to get this car on the road for as cheap, as fast as possible. But to figure that out, we're gonna have to take a bunch of engine stuff off and check the timing to make sure that everything is okay. All right, let's tackle the interior and then let's heat up the engine. Gross. Lots of garbage. We have some spilled coffee down here. It's pretty gross. And there they are, guys. B8 S4 black leather seats. These things are absolutely stunning. I'm really not a very big fan of Alcantara, whether it's the black S-line seats or the panda so-called white Alcantara seats. They just do not last. That's the problem with Alcantara. But check these out. Now these are obviously secondhand. Some minor wear on the bolsters, but all in all, fantastic condition. And let's be honest, these seats are going to look phenomenal in the S4. Now there's two problems fitting B8 seats into the B6 B7 chassis. First off, for the driver and passenger front seats, the plugs at the bottom are different than the ones in the chassis. So what I've gone and done is I sourced 2 sets of plugs off of a B6 B7 platform that I'm going to swap over to these seats. Now, as far as I understand it, the plugs are different, but the cabling is more or less the same between all of the vehicles, aside from the airbag cables, which I think may actually be different. So anyways, I should be able to swap out these plugs on these seats and just mount them up and plug them in. When it comes to the back ones, however, it's not that simple. It appears the B8 is a little bit wider because these seats are just a tiny fraction wider than the space that I have to fit them. The bottom bench would probably fit fine. I can squeeze it in there, but at the top you can see that the 2 seats are just a little too tight, meeting at the center bracket where you have to mount them. So it's a little bit hard. On top of that, the rear mounting spot on the B8 is actually lower than on the B6, B7, which is up here. So to make these work, you would have to undo the pin from the car and then somehow fit it on the bottom here. At the end of the day, it's probably not worth it because frankly, there's really nothing all that unique about the S4 rear bench. So what I decided to do instead is actually pick up a rear bench from a B7 A4 regular black leather bench, direct bolt onto the car. These are also heated, so all of the plugs work, all of the mounting points work, everything works, and these seats are actually in a very good condition. I think I paid about 80 bucks for them or something like that. So we're gonna pair up the front S4 seats with rear A4 seats, and here they are installed in the car, guys. I absolutely love this seat setup. Okay, the S4 seats from the B8 are absolutely gorgeous. The other interior upgrade I wanted to do is to change the steering wheel from the original B6 one to the 3-spoke S-line or S4 steering wheel. They have different airbags. That's the original one, and that's the upgraded one. Now the steering wheel itself fits on the spline, so you can mount it up pretty much immediately. There's no real issue with that. There it is. The problem is that the wiring between the B6 and the B7 changes. The main difference is that they go from a single igniter airbag on the B6 to a dual igniter airbag on the B7. As far as I understand it, these have a low and high impact airbag. It's a dual stage airbag, so it's not trivial to swap in the airbag the way it is. Plus, if you notice on the B6, the controls are actually on the airbag as opposed to the steering wheel as they are on the B7. So the wiring is definitely different between the two. To solve that problem, I went ahead and got the clock spring from the B7, which will plug into the B6 column and will then supply all the necessary connections to the steering wheel and the airbag. The only difference between the two is the actual airbag plug. So the B7 airbag will not plug into the B6 plug. They are different. So what I'm gonna have to do is wire the B7 airbag to the single igniter connector on the B6. So I'm probably gonna lose one of the airbag functionalities, but that should not trigger any of the airbag lights or anything like that. And it will allow us to use the B7 steering wheel in the B6. We're going to tackle all of this and the wiring for the seats in the next episode. For now, I want to take apart the engine and see if we can actually salvage it, or we have to take it out of the car and get it rebuilt. I still haven't figured out whether I can save this motor or not. And when I say save, I do mean fix for very, very little money without pulling the engine, because the moment I have to pull the engine out and spend $2,000 on timing chain job, this car becomes a little bit hard to justify, because as you saw earlier, the suspension, exhaust and everything else, it will add up to way too much money and may not be worth it. So the hope is that I can fix this motor, get it back on the road for as little as possible, so that I can, put some money on the suspension and go from there. The main issue I'm dealing with is multiple bank one misfires on cylinders 1, 3, 4. I do believe when I picked up the car, I saw a code for correlation. It's not popping up right now, so the car will run. I've got the misfires, but the correlation code's not coming back up. But I'm pretty sure I saw it when I picked up the car. So I started off looking at the intake manifold. Unfortunately, the flap adjuster valve was completely seized, so the flap did not move, which could potentially cause misfires. However, it would have affected both sides because the air distribution would have been the same on both sides. So although it is possible that a stuck valve would cause misfires on one side, it's highly improbable. So now that I've got the intake manifold off and I'm going to try and clean it up and sort it out, the next thing I want to check is the actual timing of the motor. And to do that, I'm going to have to take off the valve covers, put on the timing tools, and see if the two sides are still in time. We're going to lock the crank as well. There's no real fast and easy way to do this. It's not the biggest job in the world, but we do have to strip quite a few things. So let's just go ahead and do that. Now, to give us a little bit of room, perhaps it's a good idea to put the rad support into service position. So let's take off the headlights, let's get off the bumper, and free up some space so we can work around the motor. So after a whole lot of effort, I think I figured out that the bank one head is out of time, so I cannot fit the timing tool between the two cams. Looking at the exhaust cam, it looks like it's at least a tooth off from the intake cam. So my suspicion was confirmed. The timing is off on the motor. I was thinking about trying to open up the back panel and see if I can do the top side without removing the engine, but the problem is we've got coolant pipes coming through and then coming back around the engine. I'd really have to take half of the engine out just to access that rear cover there, and unfortunately I'm still in a very tight spot to try and do the change. So that's bad news, obviously, but it gives me the opportunity to actually build one of these motors up, and seeing as I have another one that I have to do right over there, it's not such a bad thing. So in the next episode, we're going to bring the donor S4 in the garage, pull the motor and transmission out, fix that motor, throw the donor car out, put this car in the garage, take this motor out, and then put the fixed motor in here. Or at least that's the plan. For now, we're going to sit on this for a couple of weeks until the 201 makes it out of the garage. Don't forget to go check out that project. There's lots and lots of updates that are going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. And as always, if you like what you see, click a thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe so you don't miss the next episode in the S4 restoration project. I will see you guys next time.